Hi, and welcome to the And One Podcast. I'm your host, Alex West, and today I'm joined by Patrick Oxford of the 94 Feet Report. We talk about a little bit of everything: Earl Watson, Eric Bledsoe, Giannis's MVP candidacy, and whether or not Jordan Bell's off the backboard alley-oop to himself was disrespectful. So anyway, I think it's a good listen. Brent, take us away. I'd like to welcome my guest today, Patrick Oxford, longtime guest to the podcast. Patrick, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, man. Just enjoying the morning.
Awesome. NBA, it's been a pretty eventful first week. We're a full weekend now, and plenty of storylines have come out in this first week.
Yeah, man, the offseason felt a little bit too long, even though it's probably shorter than ever, but it's awesome to be back, you know?
I am so glad that we're back. So I guess we'll start with the first thing. I mean, we're just going to talk a little NBA here, sort of jump around the league and talk about what's going on, but Earl Watson was fired a couple of days ago. The Suns seem to be in a very backwards direction. Not really sure what's going to happen with them. What were your thoughts on the Earl Watson firing?
I just don't get the point in waiting 3 games into the season to do it. I mean, they obviously weren't sold on him going into the season, and if you're not sold on a coach that you're trusting the development of your young players to, like, it's one thing if you're just actively taking to get better draft picks, but they already did that. Now they should be looking at, all right, let's see how the Thunder rose up or some other young, whatever, connect you want to make to another team that got a bunch of draft picks and then developed them into a playoff contending team. That should be the model they're subscribing to. They should have been looking for their Scotty Brooks this past offseason, because obviously they weren't sold that Earl Watson was their Scotty Brooks.
And I think that's such a good point. That's one of the things that in all of this that has sort of stood out to me is that it's a failure of upper management, because you knew that you were dissatisfied with Earl Watson to the point where you would never fire a guy 3 games in if you weren't already having misgivings, and then the losses push that over the edge. But it's such a failure of upper management to go 3 games in and then to fire a guy. And the public image in that is just horrible for the Suns. I'm not sure what you're going to do from here. I mean, obviously they played a little bit better last night, but they played against the Kings, so it's not exactly like they were out beating the world. But I'm not really sure where you go from here in terms of looking for a coach to fit their system or to fit their players or anything for the Phoenix Suns. It just sort of looks like this is a wasted season now.
Yeah, when the Rockets fired McHale, was it like 8 or 10 games into the season? Yeah. And I was never a McHale fan. I wanted him out well before that. But whenever we just had J.B. Bickerstaff come and be the interim coach for the rest of the season, that's exactly what it was. It was a lost season.
Yeah, and I just feel like you can't afford to waste seasons anymore because of the volatility of the league. I mean, obviously there are situations like the Gordon Hayward situation in Boston where seasons are going to be wasted. This is probably going to be more of a growing, developing season for Boston as opposed to a contending season, and those kind of things happen. But this shows just a level of organizational incompetence to me that is very difficult to overcome, and I think may echo for a couple of seasons for this team. I mean, they may have to waste this season and then go into the next season before they start righting the ship, just because of the way that this has happened.
Yeah, it's almost like, well, this season is just everybody get their own almost mentality, because there's not going to be any offense put in with these players' skill sets in mind at this point with any coach they bring in. Yeah. It's just going to be, we just have to run something because we didn't get anything in the training camp.
And they've named Jay Triano the interim. He was assistant. He's probably just going to keep doing what he was doing. I don't know. I'm very dissatisfied with how all of this shook out for the Phoenix Suns, a team that probably has a decent amount of talent. I mean, it's not great. It's not amazing. I'm not overwhelmed by it. But they have guys who they could develop, and they have a great player in Booker who is going to put up points if nothing else. I mean, they have pieces on the roster that look nice,
Yeah, I didn't schedule them for, a playoff spot or anything this season, but they definitely have players where it's like, okay, I could see avenues to success for Marquise Chris. I could see avenues to success for Dragon Bender. Josh Jackson, I wasn't as high on as they were, considering I had him number 9 on my board. But, I see how he could become a good player. He's shooting pretty well, I think, from 3 right now on low attempts. But, still, I don't think that his shot is something that's going to be a consistent thing.
He looks like he's throwing a bowling ball. It's just so bizarre.
Well, one time he looks like he's throwing a bowling ball. The next time he made it look like he's throwing a tennis ball, and the next time he made it look like he's throwing. His shot changes every single time.
True. Very inconsistent.
It's worse than if he looked like he was shooting it the same way every single time. At least then you'd be like, well, at least there's consistency. It's inaccuracy, inconsistency. It's not what I'd like, but yeah,
for sure. So in all of this, the Suns, I guess, arguable best player in Eric Bledsoe, a guy who's been with the organization for a couple of years now, point guard, tweeted out that he didn't want to be there anymore, and then the Suns sent him home yesterday. He didn't play in the Sacramento game last night. It looks like there is an impending trade for Eric Bledsoe. But the question sort of shaping up is where. I know that some teams expressed interest. New York expressed some interest in him, and a few other teams, even the Cleveland Cavaliers, got their name worked in. Where do you think Eric Bledsoe is going to end up?
I think New York should stay away from him because any package probably starts with Ntilikina, and giving up 7 years of control on him. Plus, I'm assuming that they're not going to want to take salary back beyond what's necessary. So you're probably not getting off Joakim Noah or anything like that. So, at that point, what are you really gaining besides 2 years where you get 35 wins?
Yeah, I'm not sure what it is for New York to be interested in Eric Bledsoe. On top of, beyond the usual of, the Knicks just want talent. I'm not sure what that has to do with, building a team for the future. Bledsoe's not on their timeline. He's 27 years old, and that's just a fact. So I'm not sure what that would mean for them.
Which means they'll probably go ahead and make that trade.
Sure, exactly.
Because it's the Knicks. Yeah.
That means that deal's pretty much already done at this point. So he'll be on the Knicks. But, I think there are a lot of other places where he could fit in a little bit better. One of the names that's come up, and I think probably the most compelling, well, there are two names that have come up that are really compelling, but the one I like the most, Mark Stein said that the Milwaukee Bucks were interested in him. And Giannis has been great this season. We're going to talk about him in a minute. There aren't enough superlatives to say about Giannis, but around him, the team has been a little bit less than what I'd like for it to be. And I think Eric Bledsoe could be an interesting fit there, but I'm not sure that there's a suitable package that doesn't include one of their big-name players.
Yeah, see, I saw, on Twitter yesterday, some source was saying, that the Bucks were offering McCurr and was it Henson and a first-round pick, something like that, something of that sort.
Actually,
and
that's actually
a 2021 protected, and I was like, that seems like a lot, and Phoenix should definitely jump on that.
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to say. That seemed like a really big package.
I don't think that's realistic.
No.
But then I was listening to the Dunked On podcast, and Nate Duncan and Danny LaRue were talking about Brogdon and Henson for Bledsoe. And at that point, I'm thinking, I'm not sure if I'm the Suns and I do that.
Yeah, that one doesn't fit very well to me. They already have a pretty good backcourt. I don't know what you're bringing into I don't know what Malcolm Brogdon's bringing to the table at 24 years old when you have guys that you want to develop on your own roster.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty high on Tyler Ulis. I know if you go look at his box score stats, you're probably not going to be like, oh, wow. But you go back and look what he did in college. He was the SEC defensive player of the year at 5'10". Obviously, he's not going to be Isaiah Thomas on defense. He has his limitations, to be sure, but he's a competitor.
Yeah, and I don't think I would want to give that up for Malcolm Brogdon, who probably is close to what his ceiling is. He always was the exact same thing coming out of Virginia. He was a high floor, low ceiling guy, and I think he's achieved a lot. Including winning Rookie of the Year last season. But I'm not sure that that's a player that garners a lot of interest for me if I'm in a rebuilding phase.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. He's more of a let me get him on a contender where he can come off the bench, preferably for a contender, I think.
Yeah, for sure. That's his role.
Yeah, to come in and just steady the offense while the starting point guard is out. He can also play alongside the starting point guard because he's got the size. He's definitely a good defender. And he's got the mindset to where he's just going to play any role the coach gives them for sure. Like I don't have that doubt about him. Like he's just going to come in and work.
But he's not the kind of guy of like, if I'm trading Eric Bledsoe, if I'm the Phoenix Suns, like
exactly.
I want to get back some youth or somebody with some upside. And
I'm going for DJ Wilson.
Right.
I'm them in a pick or something.
That's more along the lines of the player that you want. Even though Wilson, hasn't seen the floor a lot, like you want a guy who can develop and has a high upside and something like that. The other name that I found interesting in all this that is sort of floated around, and I'm again not quite sure I see the avenue to make this trade happen, but was the Denver Nuggets. Denver has not quite been the team that we wanted them to. Jokic had a pretty good night last night in a loss to Washington, but they need a little bit of help at the point guard position, and Eric Bledsoe would be a huge upgrade from what they have. Do you see any path to make this happen?
Yeah, for sure. I think this would. This is probably where I think if I was going to if I had to put money on where he was going, or I don't want anyone to put a gun to my head, but if someone did,
that would be where
I had to make a choice. Yeah, that'd be what I'd say. Yeah, but they have plenty of pieces to move. I mean, it just ask the Suns, do you prefer Moutier or do you prefer Jamal Murray? Hopefully they say Moutier because you don't want to give up Murray if you're the Nuggets. But I think if you're trying to say Jokic, like, don't even consider anybody else, definitely come to us because when he gets a restricted free agency, you hope that he comes and just makes a deal with you. But he can go out and just sign a shorter deal with someone else, and you lose years of control. Even though you match it, you lose years of control. So you do need to make sure Jokic is in, go Nuggets vibe. And I didn't see the game the other night, but I recall he was from Twitter. People were saying he wasn't really very active in shot taking.
He has not looked like last night. He looked a lot better. Last night, watching him, he looked like a little bit of a return to form. He didn't look super engaged in the first two games for me, particularly in the loss to Utah. But I definitely think that he probably maybe this is the fallout from the shorter preseason. Like guys just don't quite have their feet under them yet, and I think that hopefully can explain away what is a little bit of a slower start in his first two games for Jokic, and maybe he's going to sort of pick up where he left off now. But he looked better last night, so hopefully that whatever it was is behind him.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he had a bug or something.
Could be, and I've heard a lot of people say, like 4 games shorter on the preseason has a lot to do with it. That guys maybe aren't quite in the shape that they'd like to be in, or don't really mesh with their teammates well, just because they don't have that familiarity of playing the 8 games. But
let's be honest, stamina could be an issue for Jokic.
It really could.
Players.
It really could be. That's one of the things that really could just be going on for him. Now, Denver has some really compelling pieces. You talked about Moutier. You talked about Murray. They also have Malik Beasley. They got Juancho Hernan-Gomez. They got Trey Lyles. And then they got a couple of big contracts that sort of fit in there to make it work, like Kenneth Faried, a guy that nobody seems to be interested in. I mean, I like Faried a little bit more than most. I really enjoyed him as a college player, and I think he's a high-energy rim runner, which is always a fun thing to have. But they have a little bit of a package that can make it work. I'm not sure how much they're willing to give up to get Eric Bledsoe.
Yeah, if I'm Denver, I'm not trying to get rid of Juancho Hernan-Gomez. I feel like he's just a dynamite player, for sure. Honestly.
And like a great stretch four. Like, that's what people are looking for.
Exactly. Like, he's got a lot of the tools that people are looking for in fours nowadays. Trey Lyles I'd get off of easily. I'd like
you're ready to
admit you made a mistake. Whatever, that's fine. Like, you should have drafted OG Anunoby, but you messed up. Move on.
And you're already ready to send him out of town, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I get the appeal of Lyles, but I'm not totally sold on him. I mean, again, like, I see avenues of success for him, but like in terms of percent chance that he hits, like, rotation level player on a good team, I don't know. Like, he's not playing great right now, and I mean, 2.5 points, only 2.5 minutes a game, so I guess that's a good point per minute. So good job there.
All right, his PPMs are good. That's it. Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I think that they probably would be willing to part with some of those pieces, but I'm not sure how many of them they'd be ready to send out for Eric Bledsoe, a guy who is a great player, or who's a good player. Let me back up. He's a good player. And he hasn't really shown that he's going to be a carry the load on a playoff team kind of guy. And I think that's where Denver sort of is.
Do they need him to carry the load, or do they just need him to be a slightly above average point guard, though?
I'm a little
because he's not going to be their primary facilitator.
right.
That's
That's
still
going to
be
be
Jokic.
Yeah, for sure. But like, I think they need a little bit more help at the point guard position than other people do. I mean, I think that Gary Harris is a good player, and I think that Will Barton is a good player, and I think that Wilson Chandler is a good player, but I think they need a little bit more help in terms of creating, being a little bit more dynamic on offense, because a lot of those guys succeed as slashers or as catch-and-shoot players, and they don't have a lot of guys that can succeed off the dribble, and I think they need a lot of help there.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I'd like to see them get more Jokic and Millsap in action with the other players, maybe just off-screen action or off-ball action.
Yeah.
But, we'll see how their offense pans out. It's early in the season. I'm sure they're going to add wrinkles here and there just every week or so. It's hard to integrate a piece like Millsap and keep the continuity for an offense like that.
For sure.
That offense was definitely special.
For sure, and I think they'll find their spot like with Millsap and maybe I'm just harping on this too much, but like shortened preseason, these are things that would have worked themselves out a little bit better. We usually don't start the season until the last week of October, so there would be 2 more weeks of preseason, 2 more weeks of practice, 2 more weeks of everything before we went into real games. But here we are, and maybe a little bit of that's showing for the Denver Nuggets. But I'm gonna change gears for a second, because there's another team I want to talk about who is having the opposite problem. A team that a lot of people thought would miss the playoffs, and they still could. But the Memphis Grizzlies are 3-0. And not only are they 3-0, they have wins over the Warriors and the Rockets, and they looked great in all of them. And please tell me, Patrick, what the hell is going on?
The Grizzlies, they're good because Marc Gasol's good. He's just really awesome to watch. He makes the most difficult fadeaways I've seen since Dirk. And then Conley's been pretty good. The rotation players are stepping up. Like Andrew Harrison's defense has been pretty impressive to me. He doesn't offer much outside of defense, which is odd given his,
if you followed him growing up, as I did growing up in Houston, defense was not his calling card back then. But it is now, so that's awesome to see that he developed
into a defender. Whatever gets you to the league, get you the league. If it's deep,
exactly.
If you weren't a defender and now you're a defender, then so be it. And I think that's impressive. That team has really come on strong. I've really been impressed with the play of Mike Conley, particularly last night. He was having a pretty terrible game through 3 quarters and really came on strong in the 4th quarter. I really like Conley. I think he's a super underrated player. And obviously you've touched on Gasol, but is there really any hope that this team is going to continue to put this up? Does this look like a successful trend for them, or do you think it's a little bit of a statistical aberration?
I had them projected tied for 8th with the Clippers at 44 wins, and I think I may have given a few too many wins to the Thunder in that projection. I'm just from looking at the Thunder right now and looking at the Grizzlies, I think the Grizzlies are a better team. A lot of people hopped on the Jazz are too overrated in my projections at 52 wins. I'm still feeling good about that. Rockets still looking good, I think, even with Chris Paul staying out a few games. I think that Harden needs to learn a few lessons from last night, but other than that, I think that the Grizzlies are playoff bound at this point. I'm not gonna say a top 5 seed or anything like that, though they're looking like it with that defense. I think I had them projected as the 5th ranked defense, and maybe they finish a little bit better than that, but I think it was a matter of I didn't project them good enough as the 5th ranked defense.
That's a pretty high projection. I had them much lower. I was much lower on the Grizzlies. I didn't think they'd done a lot to revamp their team in a Western Conference that looked loaded. And right now, listen, it won't be the first time and it won't be the last. It looks like I've been pretty wrong on them. They look like a good team. They look like their continuity's really taken off. And they're getting some good play from their best players, which you got to have. But then, like you said, their role players are really coming on playing well. And, that's what it takes to win in this league. I'm not sure that they're the best team in the West or the second best team in the West. But as you start to go on down the line, you could definitely see a place for this Memphis Grizzlies team to continue to win at this level. Now, injuries change everything, and I think this team is a little bit more suspect to injuries than others are, just because of if Marc Gasol goes down, that team's in trouble. If Mike Conley goes down, they're probably in trouble. And I think they're a little bit more dependent on those two guys than other teams are. But barring that, I could see them making the playoffs again, which I did not think 2 weeks ago.
Well, it's always good to be happily
For
surprised.
sure, I would much rather be happily surprised than unhappily surprised. All right,
exactly. Although that means you may be unhappily surprised by another team.
True.
Just there's only so many wins to go around,
and there have been quite a few of those. Let me tell you, including the Oklahoma City Thunder, which you touched on a little bit less than stellar performance early in the season. Anyway, let's go on to talk about a guy who has sort of taken the league by storm. I mean, I think those of us who have been following the league for a while know this name and know what he was capable of. But Giannis Antetokounmpo this has been a coming out party for him. He has put up some insane numbers thus far this year and continues to do it on a nightly basis. And I have just been immensely impressed. What's your impression of Giannis this early in the season?
Man, he's awesome. Just watching him, I don't know how anyone could watch him, if they weren't a basketball fan and remain not a basketball fan. Just put a highlight reel of him up, and they're like, "Oh, that's what happens in this sport." Yeah,
his numbers this season through 4 games. Let me just give you these ridiculous numbers. He's averaging 36.8 points per game, 10.8 rebounds, 5.3 assists, 1.3 blocks, and 2.3 steals. That's insane.
I mean, he's looking like an early frontrunner for the MVP. Obviously, it's way too early to make any solid claims because the team success has to be there. But, it's just really impressive what he's doing at this age. I don't know if there's anyone that's made back-to-back jumps of the magnitude that he has made.
I said this last night to a friend. I was talking with somebody, and the name that sort of floated out there for me is this is very, to me, reminiscent of 2006 LeBron, where LeBron just kept improving. Every time you saw him, he was doing something better. Wasn't a consistent jump shooter, but was this monster athlete in a little bit of a different league, which was a little bit bigger than it is now in terms of play style, playing with 2 bigs. But Giannis just really reminds me of LeBron. And anytime you say that, you're making a pretty insane comparison. But, I mean, if you look at his numbers, if you watched his game, it kind of fits. I mean, I don't feel like I'm going too far into left field to say that he looks like a young LeBron.
Yeah, I mean, the jump shot is definitely going to need to develop at some point. Obviously, I don't think it has at this point. I mean, only 4 games in, but at 17% on threes and only 1.5 attempts. He's obviously not coming
right, and his field goal percentage, 65%, is insane. But I think that if you're just watching box scores, it is a little bit deceptive. He is getting to the rim pretty effectively and finishing around the rim, which may lead you to believe he's a little bit better of a jump shooter if you're just looking at the numbers. But he certainly needs to improve his form. His mechanics are a little bit wonky the further out he gets. But, I mean, everything else is there. He is 95% of a total player right now.
Yeah, just a jump shot away. And for a lot of players, a jump shot away means you may not be in the league. For him, it just means he may not be the best player in the league, and he may just be a top 5 player.
All right, let me ask you this. Is he a top 5 player in the league right now?
It's easy to say yes. You just listed off his numbers.
Those are insane. But I'm trusting you.
For any player to put that up, even over a 4-game sample, I don't know. I don't think there's any other players that aren't top 5 that can put up that line over any 4-game sample, whether it be the first 4 games or any 4-game stretch you want to put in this season.
Yeah, it's been really impressive. I mean, and I'm trusting you here sort of to reach beyond as your background, being a scout, being a little bit of an advanced analytics guy, to look a little bit beyond what everybody else is seeing. And that's why I think it's such a compelling question for you in particular, Patrick, to say, is this guy top 5? And it's easy to say yes, it's like you said, but also...
I mean, watch him. He makes great rotations on defense. That's evidenced by, he's got long arms, so he's going to get steals and blocks, but, he's there, ahead of time, meeting people at the rim. It's not coming help side. He's meeting people at the rim from his rotations. That's really impressive.
He's unbelievable. I hope that this continues. I hope it doesn't continue on Thursday night when they play the Celtics. That's just personal preference. He shredded us in the first game as a Celtics fan, and I hope that trend doesn't continue. But boy, it is just fun to see a young guy at 22 years old just come on so strongly and be such a great player.
Yeah, it brings like hope that the league's going to be all right.
And speaking of hope that the league is going to be great without LeBron, last night, rookie, well, I guess in quotation marks, rookie, Ben Simmons puts up a triple-double and was incredibly impressive in their victory. What did you think about Ben Simmons, not just in this game, but what he's shown you early in the season as a player and how he's going to develop?
I was super high on him coming in the draft. I think if you combine the 2016 and 2017 draft classes, he would be the number one pick in that, over Fultz, over Lonzo, obviously, if you're putting Fultz over Lonzo, because that's how it played out. So, I mean, he's an awesome player to watch. He makes the simple passes very well, but he's also got the flash to his game, you know? Like, when he needs to bring out the flash,
he's not afraid to do that, for sure.
But like LeBron, he sees over the top of the defense. Like Giannis, he sees over the top of the defense. He can just make the simple passes.
Last night,
and he does that.
21 points, 12 rebounds, 10 assists against the Pistons. They won 97-86. He was the best player on the floor. There's just so many things that you can say about Ben Simmons. But I guess the thing I want to say is that jump shot going to develop? I mean, that's the question. Obviously, we talked about that with Giannis, but there's a big outstanding question on Ben Simmons because of the position that he plays. He needs to be able to knock down a jump shot, and I haven't really seen that.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's going to develop anytime soon if it does. But if you have him at the 4 and you have Embiid at the 5 who can shoot threes, or Amir Johnson at the 5 who can shoot threes, and then you have Covington, Redick, and
Jared Bayless.
Let's say, Jared Bayless. Like, does he need? Like, you don't have to have 5 players that can shoot, especially if the guy that can't shoot is 6'10", can get to the rim with 2 steps.
Like, no, I mean,
I don't necessarily think him shooting is a necessary thing for them to have a successful offense. Maybe in other settings where their center couldn't shoot.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, listen, that's why I come to you for this in-depth analysis because I am a little discouraged. I mean, he's 6'10", he's 230 pounds, he's got a long wingspan. He plays the point guard position, which is unbelievable. I mean, he's very Magic Johnson-esque in terms of his build and his frame. Mm-hmm. And he's such an impressive passer. But it does kind of worry me in the trend that the league sort of goes into how valuable jump shooting is for successful teams. I mean, if you evidence by the success of the Warriors, you like to have 6, 7, 8 guys in your rotation who can shoot, and you try to minimize the guys who can't shoot, and to have one of your best players be a player who can't shoot is a little bit worrisome for me. But like you said, like he has a full repertoire of tools that at his disposal that he's willing to use, and he's going to grow up, and I think that's a really big thing that I sort of have to remember myself is that he's a young kid. This is his freshman year in the NBA. He has a lot of room to grow, but so I guess you're right in that regard.
Yeah, teams are already going over or under every single screen on him, obviously, and he's still making them pay because his steps are so fast and so long that like you go under, and if you don't meet him immediately as he's coming up out of that screen, he's going to get to the rim, and he's crafty enough to finish it a large portion of the time. Yeah, I mean, that's a great
point. Do you think the Sixers are going to be a playoff team this year? The East is maybe a little bit better than what we thought it was. Maybe it's right about where we projected it to be. Some teams looking a little better, a little worse. But in this early sample size, they're 1-3, which is not a great record, but they've been played pretty well. Simmons has played pretty well. Embiid is limited in terms of his minutes. But do you think this is a playoff team this year?
I had him at 41-41, and that's making the playoffs in the East, obviously.
All right, simple as that.
I was about to actually tweet out after they went after the first 3 losses, like, be patient, but I regret not doing it because I would have looked really good after that loss, but oh well. Yeah, I missed out.
Their schedule gets a little bit dicey. They play Houston tomorrow night. Yeah, they play Houston tomorrow night.
I'm not looking forward to that game as a Rockets fan, man.
But I think that there are. I think that they probably are going to be able to handle the Sixers a little bit better because they can shoot the ball so well. But they have a stretch coming up where they play Houston twice, Utah, Golden State, the Clippers, and then Golden State again in about the next month. So there's going to be some trying times for this young Philadelphia 76ers roster.
Honestly, if I were them, I'd rather get the hard games out of the way now and just, build some sort of semblance of chemistry, and then once you get to those easy games, you already have that. Rather than, we're stumbling through these easy games, and as soon as we start gaining a step, now we also have these hard teams, might as well get the hard games out of the way.
All right, last question, then we'll call it quits for the day. The Twitter world blew up about this. There have been 10 discussions discussing the unwritten rules of basketball. Last night, in a 30-point blowout, Jordan Bell, rookie out of Oregon, playing for the Golden State Warriors, threw an alley-oop off the backboard to himself. Now, a lot of people have a lot of thoughts on this. Some people say if you don't want to, if you don't want somebody showboating when you get down by 30, then don't get down by 30. Other people say it's disrespectful to the opponent. Where do you fall on this whole unwritten rules of the game situation with Jordan Bell?
I don't really care if he throws the ball off the backboard. It doesn't really matter to me. Honestly, he can do that if he wants. I was kind of upset when the Warriors fouled the Rockets, preventing them from breaking the three-point record in a game a few years back. Because I was just I don't feel like that's a legit way to stop someone just because, that's that's fine if it's a legit way to stop someone in an actual in-game strategy, but when you're down by 30. So, I think I'm with you. Once you're down by 30, you just, they do that.
Yeah, he's a kid. He's a young player. He is obviously trying to stretch his wings and grow a little bit as an NBA player. And I think he's going to be a fantastic player. I know that you and I were both pretty high on him going into the draft. I don't really see a problem with this. I don't really care. I get it. And I do understand that you're probably opening yourself up for a couple of cheap shots later on if you keep trying things like this. And for me, that's probably the biggest issue. If I'm Steve Kerr, I say, hey, Jordan, don't open yourself up to this. You don't want to take a hard foul from behind because of something like this. And that's probably as far for me in terms of just his health and safety as I would go with this off the backboard alley-oop.
Yeah, I agree with you that there could be repercussions later. Wasn't there an incident last season when someone did it to the Raptors and DeMar DeRozan was like, you don't do that, and then a video came out that DeMar DeRozan had done that the year previously. It always comes out, you don't do that, but then there's probably 5 plays that no one even talks about where it did actually happen. And it
for
just
sure.
Didn't get publicized.
The thing that it made me think of last night was just in terms of outside of the flow of the game was last year in the 70-point effort that Devin Booker put up against the Celtics. The Suns were fouling so they could keep getting possession so he could keep going. And to me, that's a little bit more egregious in terms of you don't want to get a player hurt. You don't want to prolong a game that's already over. And this, to me, happens in the flow of the game. Nobody's hurt. He'll probably take a hard foul later in the year as a result of it. And it's kind of self-policing in that regard, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah, if there's anyone that's going to get hurt, it would be Jordan Bell. If, he hurt himself trying to do the backboard dunk. And at that point, it's you kind of deserve that one.
Yeah, I was more worried it wasn't going to go down. I was actually watching when it happened, and I was more worried that it wasn't going to go down. Because if that doesn't go down, you're probably out of the rotation for a week or two.
I don't know. They're really high on him. The fact that he's already getting those minutes off the bat. They know that he's special. They know that he was worth every penny of that $3.5 million. And if the Bulls wanted to charge him $5.5 million, or if they could. They couldn't, but if they could have, the Warriors would have paid it.
That's just what it is. Look at Golden State, the rich getting richer. You and I have personally talked about this a couple of times, and Jordan Bell's such a fantastic player, and I think he's going to continue to develop. But I just thought that was an interesting situation and something that sort of had social media abuzz last night.
Absolutely. You mind if I get a question for you? All righty. What do you think about the Celtics so far, in particular Kyrie's performance?
You put me on the spot here. All right. I've been collecting my thoughts on this. I was kind of letting the sample size build up, but I'll get into it really briefly here. So
Okay.
I have been very impressed with the Celtics. Losing a player like Gordon Hayward takes its toll on a team in terms of rotation. It takes its toll on a team in terms of personnel. And just mentally, I think that particularly early in that Cleveland game, you saw guys like Jason Tatum and Marcus Smart sort of hesitant around the rim because of what had happened. But mentally, I've been really pleased with this team. They bounced back. They played really well. Jason Tatum looks fantastic. And I really try not to be a homer when I say that, but he looks so smooth, finishing with both hands. He's a great jump shooter. I've been immensely impressed with Tatum. He's not doing anything that blows you away, but he's so solid at everything that he does. And Jaylen Brown has been a phenomenal player. I mean, he's had those borderline all-star performances where he looks really good. He's pushing a little bit too hard, and I get it. He's a second-year player. He's only 20 years old. He's pushing a little bit too hard, and his efficiency's taken a nosedive as a result of it. But I really like that kind of effort coming out of the guy because he is so young and because the team really needs him to step up. I really would prefer him pushing a little bit too hard. So those two guys I've been really impressed with. Horford's a consummate professional. He's played really well. He is secretly the center, focal point for the team, and their success sort of depends on how well he plays from time to time. Now, let me get to the point of your question here and talk about Kyrie for a second. I have been more impressed with Kyrie than I thought I would have been. Now that's a very tempered statement, but I expected Kyrie to go hero ball. A little bit more, playing one-on-one, which he does do from time to time, and he's probably one of the best one-on-one players in the league. But I have been really impressed with Kyrie Irving for two things. He has bought into the Brad Stevens system. I think that he believes in a Brad Stevens system, and he moves the ball really well. He plays off ball really well. It seems like he is finding his flow in the Boston offense a little bit better. And sometimes he takes a contested 18-footer and I scream at the TV. But honestly, if I'm having somebody besides Steph Curry taking a contested 18-footer, Kyrie's a pretty good guy to do it. And then the other thing that has really impressed me with his performance has been his defense. It's not spectacular. I'm not going to throw at you and say he's an elite defender, but it seems to me that the tools for Kyrie to be a decent defender were always there, and it's just been a matter of effort. And both of those things I just have to give massive applause to Brad Stevens because he's such a high-character coach. He's such a high-character guy, and I think he's very well respected among players, and I think that Kyrie has sort of taken that into account and is playing a little bit harder and buying into the system. And I think that this is probably a really good situation for him to be in right now. And in terms of like his growth at 25 years old, I don't really think that there's a better situation in the league for him to be in. And so I've been impressed. I mean, maybe maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's just my impression as a homer, but he's really impressed me a little bit more than what I thought he would at this point in the game.
That's totally fair, man. I didn't see him having quite the same, offensive efficiency without LeBron, and obviously not having Gordon Hayward definitely hurts that.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. But, I think that you're right about the tools for the defense. They were always there. Like, whenever he was in the finals, it's like he was just totally garbage on defense in the finals, but if you watch him during the regular season, he was pretty much totally garbage on defense. So it's awesome that Stevens is getting him to buy in game 1, 2,
and
and
I
3.
think that's a huge thing. I mean, how much of defense is effort, and a lot of guys, don't want to play it for whatever reason, and I get that. I mean, Carmelo Anthony's saving it so he can jack up 24 shots a game, but it's really nice to see a young player, regardless of your fanship, it's really nice to see a young player who's sort of been reviled as a bad defender kind of put a stop on that and change his game in such a way that he becomes a quality defender. Yeah. So anyway,
agreed.
Did that answer your question effectively?
Absolutely, right, man. Absolutely.
Well, Patrick, I appreciate you coming on the show. Are you working on anything you want to get a plug in for real quick?
I mean, we're going to have my episode with you on Statner Draft Report out soon. That's a podcast on Armchair All-Americans. So definitely check that out. My Twitter handle is @HoopsMetrox, HOOPS METROX.
All right, man. Well, we're always looking out for the stuff you do, and always really excited about your work in terms of analytics and scouting. Just all the stuff you do, I really like to read. So I will definitely be keeping an eye out for your new stuff anytime it comes out this season.
All right, much appreciated,
you do the
man.
same.
Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. As always, follow me on Twitter at AlexWestNBA. Follow the podcast at N1 Analytics. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, wherever it is you get your podcasts. And make sure to watch for Patrick's work and for my work from the 94 Feet Report. For the N1 podcast, I am your host, Alex West. Have a good night.